Months of protests left rudderless without effective leadership, but now Lebanon finally has a new government. Prime Minister Hassan Diab announced his cabinet, chosen after intense wrangling by Shi'ite group Hezbollah and its allies. Getting a handle on Lebanon's spiralling economic crisis is the most urgent issue at hand.
I salute the uprising that pushed for this path to be taken. Lebanon has won. This is a government that meets the aspirations of protesters across the country after more than 3 months of anger. And it will work towards addressing their demands.
But instead of calming them, protests flared up again on the streets of the capital Beirut and around the country. Demonstrators say they wanted a government of independent experts who will be able to deal with the country's financial crisis and not ministers selected through horse trading by political parties.
We want a government of experts. The politicians should not have brought their advisors.
This establishment and these leaders do not represent us. This government doesn't reflect us. We want a government that's ours.
Protesters are demanding swift progress, which may prove difficult for the new government. With Hezbollah designated a terrorist group by the US, its key role in picking Lebanon's ministers will make it harder for the country to win the foreign support it so vitally needs.
Well, for more on the story, I'm joined in the studio by DW reporter Aya Ibrahim. Good to see you, Aya. So, first of all, how different is this new government from the old one?
So this is a downsized government. Now there are 20 ministers in the Lebanese government from about 30 before. Some ministries have been merged. For example, agriculture and culture, which has raised some eyebrows, if you will. Tourism and social affairs have also been bundled up. In terms of female representation, this has a very high female representation. 6 ministers out of the 20 are women. And for the first time, Lebanon has a female defense minister. And this is really a government coming after months of protest. And the big difference that it is actually tasked, it has the behemoth task of saving Lebanon from the crisis that it is currently undergoing. These are from the differences, if you will, but there are a lot of also similarities. As we heard in the report leading in, a lot of the ministers have been handpicked by the political elites. Heed and consideration was also paid still to sectarian divisions and political establishment parties, which was a key demand from the protesters, that this doesn't happen anymore, that they want a government of complete technocrats. And some of these ministers are indeed specialized people in academics, but what the protesters say is that these are also advisors to former ministers. For example, the Ministry of Energy, the new minister, is an advisor who's been in the ministry since 1995. And the country is facing a huge energy and electricity crisis with power cuts. But perhaps the most notable difference, something that came and caught my attention yesterday at the press conference from the Prime Minister when he was asked, is there any representation from the protesters in this ministry? And he said, yes, there is. And then when the journalist then asked, okay, who is that? He said, well, let's talk about it later, maybe in a smaller room. So there was a lot of hesitation to get into that, obviously still very sensitive, given the reaction from the streets.
Now, this new government has been welcomed by some. The UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, says he will work with it to support reforms. But the big question is, will this new government be accepted by the Lebanese people? Will the protesters accept it?
So I was in Lebanon just a couple of days ago, and the mood on the street is really, really tense. Even before Hassan Diab announced this government, there was already a lot of agitation against it without even really listening to the people that are there. And that's something that the protest movement is being criticized for, that they're not even really giving a chance to the Prime Minister to announce this government and to then see how it operates. This happened yesterday, even before they announced it. So it seems that there's already a lot of skepticism from the street, precisely because in the month leading up to the announcement of this government, a lot of the same old political maneuvers were observed, different political parties delaying the announcement of the government just because they want to have a minister here or a seat there, et cetera, et cetera. So there's already a lot of skepticism on the streets that maybe this is just same old, same old. And another really important thing is that this is a government that excludes Saad al-Hariri's party, the Future Movement, and the Druze Progressive Socialist Party, and the Lebanese forces. So now you have, talking about the differences from the last government, very established parties in the opposition, and they have popular support as well. So they could, in this context, also mobilize the masses to come out against this government.
Now, Lebanon is facing both a political and a financial crisis, accompanied by social unrest. What impact is this having on the country? It must be taking a tremendous toll.
Well, something that the protesters kept telling me time and time again, they said, our presence on the street is not causing this crisis. This crisis caused our presence on the street. They were, this was triggered by a WhatsApp text, something that was really insulting for people, that the government wants to subsidize itself off of something like their calls. Wildfires, the government not being able to deal with them, electricity cuts. I mean, I was just in Beirut, 6 hours a day of electricity cuts, and this is daily business. Hospitals being unaffordable. Banks, because of this panic, imposing capital controls on people being able to withdraw their money. So that's an important thing to remember. With that being said, it's not helping because it's making Lebanon look like an unstable place to the rest of the world.
Aya, thank you so much for your insights. DW's Aya Ibrahim.